in the mossy woods in Derbyshire today, so I'm looking for a very old lead mine. But yeah, Derbyshire's more difficult than Wales to navigate. Stuff isn't always marked on the maps, and it just seems to be less accurate. I don't know, I need to work it out, but if you come and join me, maybe we'll find something. So this lead mine, it was worked right back in the day when they would drive levels by hand, so hand-picked Coffin Levels, and we would expect to find one in there, hopefully, but there's only one way to find out. So I don't know if this is too good to be true, but I wonder whether there could be an adit over there. So I've been wandering round looking rather unsuccessfully, but I've noticed there's this huge cliff face. So I kind of have a feeling, and that looks a bit like a spoil heap there, so I'm gonna check right there just behind it, because you never know. I was complaining about all these nettles going past, but actually thinking about this in summer, it would be covered in them. Wouldn't be fun. So I'm at the top of the spoil heap, and I thought it might be just here, but it's just a little crack in the rocks. That's not an adit. Oh, but right next to it, there actually is an adit. Oh my god, maybe finally I found it. Yeah. Oh, and I think that's the one. Yeah, so without further ado, oh, it's a bit wet, but yeah, once you go in, it actually is very nice and dry, and it's almost, well, I don't want to say it's a tall adit, but you know, you can almost stand up, which is really nice. And straight away you can see this sort of primitive shape. There's a bit of a choke there, but that shouldn't be a problem to crawl through. And straight away you can see how they were struggling clearly with this side, and I'm kind of thinking this was blasted out a little bit later, and this is where the old man, as they would call it, so all the old workings, they used to be called old men's workings, because even to the Victorian miners, these very old adits, you know, these Coffin Levels, even to them they seemed ancient. And we know that this mine was started sort of in the early 17th century, so the first records go back to 1630s, so that's quite a long time. You know, we're talking about a 400-year-old mine working here. So I'm now right inside this choke. Thankfully I've got my knee pads, and just off here there's a crosscut. There's a tiny crosscut, but it doesn't really go very far. And if we go straight, then there's actually the beautiful adit continues, and it doesn't seem to be too wet, so that should be all right. Yeah, it's funny because they've got some of this is sandstone, so you do find quite a few fossils. There's a good example there of a little shell, but in fact there's more than one type of rock here. So just lower down where you see this black dark rock, this is what the locals, you know, back in the day the old men would call Tote Stone. I don't know why they would call it Tote Stone. I mean, Tote Stone is almost like this mythical stone, but essentially the reason why they probably thought of it that way is because it's extremely hard, and obviously if you're trying to drive a mine level, then that's your curse. So sometimes they would hit this Tote Stone, and that would really slow them down, and sometimes even divert the course of the workings. But obviously, you know, they had to get to the vein where they... So this Tote Stone here runs sort of lower along almost like along the floor, and then the level itself is carved into sandstone. But really, all it is just a sort of an igneous sort of volcanic rock. So you know, they tend to be really tough. A bit like in Wales, you get really tough rocks. They're all igneous rocks. Straight away we can see some pick marks here on the wall, so clearly the level started as just a small coffin level and then was widened out by later miners. We know that these mines continued up until 19th century when it stopped, so that's why, you know, it's It was never a sort of large scale working, but it did continue through many years. So they are important workings in the history of things, because this valley is chock-a-block full of mines. So it's sort of a famous area in Derbyshire, all on the slopes around here. It's a beautiful adit. I was hearing all this water, and actually, rather conveniently, the water seems to be draining into this passage in between the rocks. Sort of, it's a crack. It's a natural crack in the rocks, as you have, but it just means that the adit, instead of draining outwards, it's actually sort of draining, well, outwards up to this point, and then inwards, downwards. Love it. There's that crack, continues on the other side of the wall, so it's just, and in fact it's draining that side as well. I like that. This actually has got an unusually good example of the vein itself. So you can see where the vein runs along the course of the ceiling, and you can literally, so you've got, there's a clay inclusion there, and then you've got all this, well, so obviously they would have removed any obvious galena, but you could still see small bits here and there still remaining, and other than that it's just lots of calcite, yeah, lots of minerals embedded. But anyway, we're going in, we're going enough chatting, and let's see what this mine has got to offer. We're met with a bit of a crossroads here, and that one doesn't go anywhere. We're going to carry on straight, but just after checking out this little level here, only because it has a nice profile there further on. So that's interesting. There's a good example of some of that Tote Stone. You can see it's really dark, sort of really hard material, proper volcanic rock. So for the old man, this was a difficult one to work. And it sort of runs, it only runs up until there, so it's almost just at the foot level, fortunately, because otherwise they really would have struggled. So now back at the crossroads, we're gonna carry on going deeper into the mine. Yeah, it gets really muddy here. Oh dear. That mud always wants to suck you in. Sticky mud. The material is so fine here, so you see you've got these clay, sort of almost like kaolin, almost like white clay deposits, and over there, you see there, it's so fine that literally all that has eroded down, and there's just a tiny arch now, but still stands there because it seems like there's an inclusion of harder rock just at the top, so it stayed as an arch. We're going to go through it. But yeah, all these minerals there's this small coating of iron where it's oxidizing and coming through, and then still all the clay sort of, you know, there's all the ferrous material, all that's there. But if you see there, that's almost white. Yeah, that's extraordinary. And the vein, the weakness in the rock there still goes along the ceiling, so that's the main cause of the vein. And there's almost like a profile of a coffin level up ahead. Okay, under the arch. Oh, it's really clay around here. Getting stuck. Alright, it gets a little bit wet. Oh dear, dear. I hope this is not too muddy. Ooh. Strange. Can you hear that? There's a very strange sound. And I know it sounds really strange. I don't know if you can hear it on camera, but really all that is, I suspect there's some kind of bigger water feature up ahead. But it, you know, stuff always sounds like something else when you're in mines. And then you get to it and you just think, oh, That's all there is, but let's investigate and see what that is. So we're starting to see some pick marks here on the walls again, at least on the left-hand side, as well as in the ceiling here as well. So this was the original level. That means the old man worked in quite far deep in. You know, sometimes you'll have a coffin level to start with, or remains of it, and then eventually it'll sort of, you know, the later miners will extend it, but not here. Coffin level ran all the way through, and they still widened it a little bit, as was the fashion back in the day. So there's more water here, and I think I can hear some kind of churning water, which sort of explains maybe where that sound was coming from. I just need to get over this flooded bit, and we'll check it out. Ah, that's interesting. So again, it's the second place like that. The water is just churning right down and disappearing somewhere under the ground. And there is also a very small, curious little passage. Ah, they just worked out sort of a flat vein. Yeah, God knows what they found there, because the rock looks quite bare. Well, that's curious. It might be backfilled as well. There might be a passage that was there earlier on. A lot of water flowing out still, so there must be another source where it's all coming from further deep inside. Ah, okay, so another tiny alcove, tiny crosscut. Again, they hit this Tote Stone, but didn't really find very much by way of the vein. The rock changes here quite a bit. There's a lot of clay, so that means instability, that means it gets washed out. But it carries on. Ah, there's more evidence here of the old man. More pick marks. Yeah, so that means the old miners worked all the way through here. Yeah. So we're gonna follow and see how far, if we can see more evidence of the old man's workings. Maybe a coffin level if we're lucky. There's all that water beautifully running down. There's an old backfilled passage, but that would be, yeah, that is it. They didn't really find anything there. Oh, it gets really narrow, and right there, right at the back of the wall, I can see pick marks. Right at the very end, we're going to go and investigate. Yeah, so straight away here, we're now in the original adit, so you can see there's pick marks on the wall, on the ceiling, and on the sides, both sides in fact. So we're in the original workings now, and I can't stand up here, so I'm not very tall, around 168, so 5'6" in feet, and I can't stand up here, so it's really snug. Yeah, and the rock is quite unstable. There's a lot of fluorspar, sort of calcite, but they didn't really mine it back in the day. Yeah, there's a good echo. Right, let's see. Wow, yeah, it meanders, it changes course. It always makes me wonder how the old miners would decide that they're going to change course, you know, how they would judge it. And the spooky sound is back, so that means there's some more activity happening. Probably water. That's interesting. There's an old sleeper here, and another one. There, I don't know, yeah, you can just about make it out over the ripples. So there would have been a really narrow, just enough to fit, a really narrow track for the carts. Perhaps another wooden rail, sort of a track with wooden rails like we saw in the other mine. They're quite rare overall, but in this part of the country you can still encounter some. And here's more of those beautiful pick marks. So this is, and you can see the grooves in the ceiling, so that's where the original level would have gone through. So the level now turns almost at a 90-degree angle, but you can see, even though it's been widened, you can see still that sort of final groove there before they change direction. That still remains, and then the whole thing turns. And then again, you can see both pick marks and shot holes, where it's been just widened sort of just a tiny bit. And again, some of those wooden rails as well, wooden sleepers. Yeah, and the coffin level continues. Beautiful shape here, and actually I have to say I can't stand. So this yeah, obviously, you know, in the 1630s, 1640s, yeah, they were driving fairly comfortable coffin levels, but already by then. Okay, so there seems to be a little collapse, but does it change course again? So just before it changes course, again you see that sort of typical telltale groove at the end. They change their mind, and actually it's brilliant because it shows how they would have actually driven it. So, you know, we sort of think of the walls and they were scraping the walls, but you have to start, really you start with a sheer rock. So so what they would have done, and different miners did it in different ways. So some would do a groove all around and then remove the inside, and then others would sort of go inwards. But this one shows quite interesting how it's almost like they were maybe thinking of stopping, or maybe that was their technique. So they would drive a channel, almost a central groove, and then widen it from the sides. And there's two grooves, so they would then sort of expand it up to the level where they decided that was sort of wide enough, just wide enough for one person. Hence a coffin level, hence the name. In case you wonder. Wow! Oh my God! This is extraordinary. This is what a true coffin level looks like. So just enough to sort of stand up a coffin. It's more of a ghostly shape. You know, some people will argue that a coffin level has to have that coffin shape, but sort of traditionally that's what we call them. Wow, but let's enter into this magical coffin level. Oh my God. Oh, you can still see even the roof where the grooves went. And it really meanders, it really turns. Always boggles my mind how they would just change direction. Wow, and it turns again. It's really tall. I can comfortably walk. So I think even someone possibly 6 foot tall could walk through this. Yeah, wow. And there you sort of see the more traditional shape. So where the ceiling is slightly flattened, and then it just nicely sort of goes around. So this is a more traditional, well, coffin shape, if you like. There, you can see that there. There, typical coffin level. Stunning. There's not that many of them, so you know, when you find one, it's really a treat. Oh, it's really strange because when it's something to do with coffin levels and maybe water, or maybe the way the air moves, it sounds like there's someone talking. So like now, I don't know if you can hear. To me here standing, it sounds like there's someone talking behind me, somewhere back at the sort of, you know, earlier in the mine, even though I know there was not a soul there were no people around me. But, well, unless someone has actually come in to explore, but I doubt it. I think this is just an illusion. Well, let's see where this level leads to. So it turns again and really sharp. And starts to, oh, and it's just a brilliant section here. Right, let's see. So it's really nice work that all the pick marks, they're sort of completely vertical. You can see that there's almost like slightly going a sort of like almost like a circle, like a crescent sort of shape. And I think that's when sometimes when it's inside a mine and it's not clear which direction it's been driven, if you see that sort of, that crescent shape, you know it's been driven that sort of forward, because that's how you would swing a pick. But look at that, oh gosh, I don't think I've seen a coffin level sort of that tall and that perfect. I know there are quite a few in this area, so we might be able to find even better ones, but I love this. Yeah, and it turns again, so yeah, the old man has gone in quite far. Wow, and it carries on. It's not often that you get coffin levels that are proper long, so really this is an excellent example. And ironically, it's actually really nice and easy to walk through because it literally is perfect height. You know, at least for a small person, it's both wide enough and tall enough. They widen it here just a little bit, maybe on the bend, where the new miners had to push the carts through in the more modern times. So yeah, it carries on. I can hear a lot of rumble, so that must be that water somewhere further in. So there's a bit of miners' graffiti. So there's a carving with the letter P, but just before it there's two mysterious dots, sort of two holes. Yeah, so that's quite difficult to decipher. Normally there's initials, but that's just two dots and P. Yeah, I can't see anything else around to give it any more clues. Very curious. Yeah, there's a really good example here of miners' work. You see how just by where the ceiling connects to the wall, how these pick marks, they sort of swing forward. So nice swift movements, so they would just try and chip it downwards. And this is where it's been widened by shot holes. The rock seems to be quite crumbly here. And we're turning again. Oof, there's a lot of water coming down there. Oh my God. Oh, it looks like there's some kind of a... Right, so there's a waterfall there. It gets deeper. Ooh. Wow, that's quite a feature. Right from the ceiling. Wow. Loads of water. That's where it's coming from. So that's what was causing all that noise. All those spooky sounds. It was just water. And I think we've reached the end. Does it go further? Ah, choke's almost to the ceiling. People have gone in there. Yeah, okay. So that's the end of it. I can see us sort of, crawled in just a little bit and see where it just completely chokes, sort of becomes really, really small, and then that's no longer human size. Maybe people were trying to dig in, or even the miners. But that's yeah, that's the end of this mine. Well, so that's the end of our explore. I hope you enjoyed this coffin level, and you want to see some more and more mining adventures, then do catch up with me soon. You can subscribe, and then you'll get notified of more videos. Okay, take care now. Bye.